In 2006, an author named Robert Bolvol suggested that ancient Egyptians may have used an unknown technology to build the pyramids. Something so advanced it was lost before later civilizations could discover it. Now, this sounds like some kind of pseudo-archaeology mumbo-jumbo, but we think there's more to the story here. There is indeed evidence that they had a level of engineering knowledge completely at odds with what we expect for their time period. And if scientists can only begin to understand how these structures were made, just imagine all the other things the Egyptians did that we don't even know about. Building the pyramids would be impressive no matter how you did it. It's hard to overstate how massive these things are. The largest, the Great Pyramid of Giza, stands 147 meters tall and contains over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing several whole tons. These stones were quarried, hauled to the construction site, lifted into place and precisely cut without the aid of any modern tools. Not to mention the logistics of feeding a massive workforce over a period of several decades. We know the basics of how the pyramids were built because archaeologists uncovered an ancient quarry with tools still in use, along with unfinished tunnels and a ramp system. But how exactly did the Egyptians move these giant stones? The theory goes that the ancient builders began by cutting a ramp into the side of a nearby hill. This ramp would eventually extend to the top of the pyramid itself. Then, they dragged huge limestone blocks up the ramp using levers, rollers, and manpower. Once the blocks reached the top, they would slide them into position using wet sand to reduce friction. Then, they would lower the ramp and repeat the process until the pyramid reached its intended height. This is basically the consensus view of Egyptologists. However, researchers are divided as to how they got the stones to the top of the ramp in the first place. Some believe that the stones were simply dragged one at a time, while others believe that they may have used some sort of internal ramp or sled system to move multiple blocks at once. But there is another explanation, one that doesn't involve ramps at all. In 2013, researchers proposed a new model based on the analysis of ancient quarry marks left behind from when the blocks were removed from the ground. Their calculations suggested that the Egyptians may have used a powerful lever system to fling the stones up a central canal, sort of like a giant catapult. In fact, the team claimed that this method was the only way to explain the presence of certain groove marks found on the undersides of the stones. But unfortunately, the data wasn't conclusive enough to rule out the possibility of ramps. And the idea of lever catapults has been largely ignored ever since. And that brings us to Robert Bolvol's controversial suggestion. While excavating the step pyramid of Khafre, which is right next to the Great Pyramid, Bolvol and his team discovered a tunnel that didn't quite go where they expected. What makes this discovery especially interesting is that it was actually the second such tunnel they found. The first was discovered in 1907 during the construction of a railway line near the Giza Plateau. That tunnel ran under the base of the Great Sphinx and led to a small chamber around 25 meters below the surface. It was never fully explored and its purpose remains a mystery. Bolvol suspected that the newly discovered tunnel might connect to the first. So he sent a camera through the opening, but it didn't come out the other side. And upon further inspection, they found that the tunnel had collapsed. So they tried drilling instead, hoping to bore a hole through to the other end. They got within 10 meters of their target before their drills broke, revealing that the tunnel was filled with rubble. However, where the shaft finally did emerge on the other side, they found that it led into the bedrock, suggesting that the Egyptians may have used it to anchor the structure in place. So far, so good. But Bolvol believed there was more to these tunnels than met the eye. He argued that these shafts must have been constructed using a sophisticated drilling machine, something that required much higher levels of technology than anything the Egyptians would have had access to. For example, the tunnel entrance sits around 20 meters beneath the current surface, but the Giza Plateau has been eroding for thousands of years. If we extrapolate backwards, it means the tunnel would have been dug at least 40 meters beneath the surface, which is beyond the reach of any human or animal digging with rudimentary tools. Not to mention the incredible precision required to drill a straight hole that deep. Based on the depth of the tunnel, Bulvol estimated that the Egyptians would have needed a rotating drill bit that could exert 45,000 newtons of force, comparable to today's industrial drills. Even the deepest mine shafts in ancient Greece were nowhere close to this level of sophistication. And while the Egyptians were known for their ingenuity, it seems highly unlikely that they independently invented this level of technology only to lose it again before the rest of the world could catch on. Instead, Balwell argued that the Egyptians must have inherited this technology from a previous civilization that was lost in the biblical flood. Now, while this idea has understandably been met with skepticism from most Egyptologists, there is certainly reason to question the status quo. The pyramids represent an extraordinary leap in engineering, architecture, and mathematics. For example, the stones forming the outer layer of the Great Pyramid are so accurately machined that they form a continuous gasket with their neighbors, allowing the entire structure to remain watertight. The internal passages and chambers are precisely aligned with the four cardinal directions, and the pyramid as a whole is oriented within a margin of error of 0.05 degrees. If you're skeptical about the possibility of ancient Egyptians achieving this feat, just consider that many scholars previously believed that they didn't even have the concept of zero or an accurate representation of pi. There's also the issue of workforce size. Most Egyptologists agree that the labor force peaked at around 10,000 workers who spent roughly 20 years constructing the pyramids. But other researchers suggest that the workforce may have peaked at 40,000 laborers spread out over a period of 80 years. And others argue that the pyramids may have been the result of a massive, unprecedented mobilization of labor on par with the construction of the Trans-Siberian Railway or the Chinese Great Wall. It is difficult to say because the population of Egypt around the time of the pyramid's construction is completely unknown. We don't even know if the pyramids were built during a single reign. All these estimates rely on assumptions about the rate of construction and work efficiency. These aren't the only anomalies that challenge our understanding of ancient Egyptian society. Researchers are also baffled by undeciphered hieroglyphic texts that seem to depict advanced technologies like solar panels or batteries. There are also reports of mysterious artifacts like the Baghdad battery, which consists of a clay jar, a copper tube, and an iron rod. There are dozens of similar artifacts strewn across Egypt that seem to defy explanation. Did the Egyptians really invent electric batteries only to lose the technology again before it was rediscovered in Greece? Or are these objects nothing more than cleverly shaped containers used for holding cosmetics or perfumes? While many dismiss these discoveries as misunderstandings or misinterpretations, others argue that there is evidence that the ancient Egyptians had access to a high-energy state of matter. In 1936, a British researcher named J.A. Lucas published a paper describing a small copper sculpture excavated at the foot of the Great Sphinx. To the casual observer, it looks like just a lump of metal, but according to Lucas, the strange markings on the object indicate that it was created by pouring molten copper onto a mold in its gaseous state. At the time, the scientific community was dubious. The idea of a gas-fueled furnace seemed absolutely absurd. So, they dismissed his paper as a mistake or fraud. However, in 2014, Researchers revisited Lucas's controversial claims and found evidence supporting his hypothesis. The copper sculpture contained traces of gold, which can only be produced by heating copper to temperatures above 1000 degrees Celsius. And the team couldn't account for any natural phenomenon that could have created the mold's detailed texture without the use of a furnace. It's possible that the Egyptians used furnaces to create alloys that were more durable than pure copper, but researchers haven't found any direct evidence of this yet. Could ancient Egyptians have harnessed a powerful energy source to create their incredible structures? Unfortunately, there's no way to say for sure. Most of the archaeological evidence that might shed light on these mysteries has already been lost to history, destroyed by looters, eroded by wind and rain, or simply overlooked because it didn't seem important at the time. Maybe one day we'll discover even more evidence that turns our entire understanding of ancient Egyptian civilization on its head. But for now, the true extent of their technological achievements remains shrouded in mystery.